Hello, and welcome to the Citrix AI Hotsheet. My name is Brian Madden, and I am a futurist at Citrix.
And my name's Dave Brear. I'm an account technology strategist, also at Citrix.
Uh, Dave and I both have decades of experience sort of with Citrix in large enterprise environments. We are also both what you might refer to as AI enthusiasts. And we talk quite a bit about, at work about how AI is entering the work world, specifically how it's entering our customers, because, there's a lot of talk about AI and like all these, oh, it's going to take everyone's job and you can vibe code tomorrow, these new applications. And I'm like, our customers are like banks and hospitals and manufacturing. You're not going to vibe code like a new air traffic control system uh, with AI, not at least anytime soon. And so we sort of realized there aren't really podcast conversations around like what's really happening with AI in the enterprise, because of course AI is being marketed to like directed at end user consumers, and so individual workers, like, they're using AI, they're using ChatGPT, they're using it in like very powerful ways. Now you hear things like AI can use computers. Like, how does that all work? So I think that's what we're going to try to unpack um, on this show and like in this series, which we are calling the AI Hot Sheet.
Yeah. And the aim really is to take all what's happening on the AI frontier, distill it down, and sort of play back how it's relevant to the enterprise.
Yeah, like we want to make you sound smart in like short, quick takes. And with that, actually, let's jump right in. We have like sort of three topics this week. The first one is one that I picked, and then we got one that Dave picked, and then we'll kind of get into it from there. So the one that I want to jump into immediately that I picked is, to be honest, this is the reason why I joined Citrix in the first place. I have this thesis that the way that AI is going to enter the enterprise is not from the top down, like big projects where like we're going to redesign some system with AI. Like, yes, that's happening, but they're like big and slow and traditional, like gunky enterprise IT styles of happening. But like there's this other story that people aren't talking about as much, which is that individual workers are using AI, like you're using ChatGPT and Claude a lot of time on personal subscriptions. Um, and they're using it more and more, right? Like in the old days, it was just like a fancy Google. And now people are starting to like load it up with like context and like notes and all these kinds of things. And it's being used more and more. A lot of times companies don't even really understand how it's being used or what their employees are doing. But my viewpoint is like that's actually the important area to look at. And the reason for that is that part of AI, the way that individual workers are using it. So those AI tools, they can use computers now. Like literally, there's a thing called computer using agents, KUA, they call it, where the AI can operate a desktop computer, or it can like operate a web browser. And like that to me is really interesting because I think like if you look at Citrix, our whole history has been around like taking existing enterprise applications and kind of like wrapping them in like a modern delivery and security layer and delivering it out to customers. Like that's why enterprises use us. So like, back in the 90s, it was, oh, you don't have to rewrite your enterprise apps for web apps. You can just like put them on Citrix. Then you get the benefits of like running it anywhere and all that kind of stuff. And within enterprises, I mean, especially again, within our like big traditional customers, they have these enterprise systems that have decades of like compliance and regulation and process and workflow and data and like all this stuff like in them. And like there's like regulation and you can't just like change these things. It's like literally you can't. Like the government won't let you change regulated applications and that kind of thing. So, so what's AI going to do? It's not changing government regulations so you can like vibe code a new drug approval system. It's going to be, I think the AI is going to actually use the same applications that the human workers are using in ways that are very much like the way that human workers operate. And I kind of like this because that way, like you don't have to change your applications if you're doing this. Like my mental picture is that AI workers are kind of like human workers. I don't mean with like literally, but like they're if they can use a computer system, like they have logins, they have user profiles, like governance, user ID, all these kinds of things. And so if I have an AI that like if I have an existing process and I want to have AI start to do that process, don't rebuild all my apps for the AI. Just have my AI use that process. And I like that because I don't have to change anything. I can use all my, like every company has some guy in the basement who has one job doing one thing in one app, and they don't have to change that process, whether the worker is human um, or AI. So to me, this is like the logical pathway of how AI enters the workplace. Tell me I'm crazy, Dave.
No, absolutely not. This is an evolving space as well, in that my personal experience of computer using agents is very limited. And it was also very unsatisfying in that it was extremely slow. It seemed like it was taking minutes between each click. And also the environment that they're operating in are not the environment where I'm logged in, I have my credentials sorted out. It was a really poor experience. So
I'm with you on that because, like, again, I had this idea like 2 years ago, like, oh my gosh, this is how you get AI in the enterprise. Don't change your enterprise for the AI, change the enterprise, change the AI for your enterprise. And then when computer using agents came out, they were horrible. Now, part of it was just bad AI. I have to say, there's benchmarks. We'll put it in the show notes. Like one's called OSWorld, and it just tracks like how good AI is at operating a computer. Today's AI now exceeds the median human. So, like AI not knowing how to use a computer, that's not a thing anymore. What is a thing though is what you said, Dave. It's so slow, and it's interesting. The reason why it's slow is because the way these things actually work. You know, the AI doesn't run on your computer. When you use Claude, like desktop or ChatGPT, the desktop app is just like a thin client. Like it's sending all your commands into the cloud. All the AI braininess is happening in the cloud, and then if it needs to use a computer, even if it's your local computer, the AI just asks your computer like, "Hey, give me a screenshot," and it looks at the screenshot and says, you want to click here," and it sends back like an XY coordinate, click there, and then send me another screenshot. And so it's like a series of screenshots, and those screenshots are really, really slow for AI to process. It's because, like, how AI is able to like look at a picture and figure out like this is a horse, this is a whatever. It's the same kind of processing where it's like just taking a picture of your screen and thinking, probably I want to click here. Let's see. And then, but even that, it takes it like 5 or 10, 20 seconds to process. It's expensive in terms of tokens. It's just very slow. And so, yeah, it's just like something that takes 15 seconds for a human to do takes the AI like 5 minutes. And so I think that caused a lot of people to be like, Brian, you are absurd to think that AI is going to use a computer. And I'm like, it's going to get better. But the other thing too, to your point, Dave, which is really important, is like the AI is running in the cloud. It's not running like on the desktop that's being used. And so when AI fires up a computer or fires up a browser, it's actually not like the corporate desktop. Like we have corporate desktops that we manage, whether it's with Citrix or whatever. And you've got like your profiles and your lockdown and your policies and all this kind of stuff. But then when you ask your AI to use a computer, it's like some random VM in the cloud, or it's like a random worker's desktop. And it's not that controlled corporate environment. So there needs to be a way for the AI to connect into that corporate environment. And I have to say, in preparation for the show, I was doing some research. A lot of progress is being made on these computer using agents to make them more efficient. So there's a paper that was just published a couple of weeks ago, and it's on that like archive website. I'll put the link in the show notes, where what they're doing is they're saying, hey, there's a better way than just screenshots. And I guess I should say, like, to kind of back up, AI can use web browsers also. And when AI initially used web browsers, it was screenshots, but then some smart people, like not us, realized, oh, hey, like there's a W3C web standard for like website accessibility. So actually everything on a web page is like marked and has IDs and all these kinds of things. Let's just send like that semantic structure for the page to the AI, and then it can process it like way faster. It doesn't actually have to like do a screenshot deconstruction, and it can navigate like very quickly. So you may have noticed if you were using like AI that uses browsers in the past like 6 months or so, they got like way faster, and it's because they stopped using screenshots. Fun fact, they still use screenshots as a fallback for like video and canvas regions and for captchas.
Yeah.
Which is why, because AI is so slow to process screenshots. That's why captchas now are like drag a slider, drag the tree into the park, and you have to do it within like less than 2 seconds or whatever, because the AI can't process a screenshot that fast. So like AI browser use is like more or less been solved because they're not sending screenshots. Well, this paper I was just mentioning is taking that same approach, and these researchers were using. There's some instrumentation in Windows. Have you heard of the UI automation framework, UIA they call it?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's so this is like RPAs and other things. It's a way to like programmatically allow like software process to like process interactive screen elements on the computer. Now, like caveat, of course, it was only for new applications that are written this way. There's always going to be old ones. And, like, again, there's always going to be traditional applications. We work at Citrix. It's kind of a big part of why we exist. But I think my point is, though, is we can see a future moving forward where AI computer using agents are not just a series of screenshots, but rather where the computer they're connecting to can send like some semantic information to kind of help the AI operate faster and not like burn all these tokens, which obviously AI vendors are trying to do that because like everyone knows, like we're in a token constrained environment, GPUs are scarce, power, all that kind of thing. So like the more efficient AI vendors can make things, the better. So in my mind, you take that, you figure out how to have those AIs then, connect into your corporate managed environment, not some like random computer in the cloud. And I think for these reasons, the sort of more plausible path forward for AI entering the enterprise, at least in terms of like end user computing and working, is the AI is going to use the existing desktops and the existing applications that the human workers do. It'll have its own login ID, we hope.
I think that's
Like
definitely necessary.
yeah, like give it more restrictions, like all those kinds of things. Give it like I don't want to be blamed when my AI goes nuts. I want to have it so locked down. Like I want my AI to access my Outlook, but like read only mode, please. So that's it. So anyway, so my whole thing I'm bringing is I think AI is literally going to use the computers and the browsers and the existing applications that humans do. And I think that's a pathway forward in the enterprise because enterprises like spent 30 years building their desktops and applications and browsers and processes and workflows and support and training and all the things around that. Just like let AI use that. And so that's kind of, I don't know. This is my vision of kind of where I think things are going.
I know, I totally agree. And like I said, my head was up. Well, it's very slow. It needs to improve. It sounds like what I like about this field is that what I thought a week ago often turns out to be incorrect and out of date. The progress is coming really quickly. So the fact that that constraint of being able to just require screenshots to do everything, I think it just shows the direction we're going in and the speed of travel. And yeah, it's an interesting time.
Yeah, like that paper that I just mentioned that talks about that as a technique, which by the way, that technique it's like uses 80% fewer tokens to process screen actions than looking at just screenshots. That paper came out like literally 2 weeks ago. I only learned about it in preparation for this show. So yeah, so that's what I got. So Dave, what have you brought for a topic to talk about today?
So it's really interesting, actually. I think it segues nicely from what you're talking about there, in that a lot of the enterprise AI conversation these days is about doing the same work but doing it faster, automating it, having a computer act on your behalf. But I think there's another way that AI can and is being used that is talked about a lot less, where it's used to deepen thinking and improve the quality of output as well. And I think a lot of people are already working in this way. You just don't know about it in the typical enterprise.
I want to be very clear.
So
It's like, let's not even be cagey. Dave and I
yeah,
are working this way. So like I'm on board with what Dave's talking about because this is how I work every day and how Dave does too. So like pay attention. This is important. This is not the future. Like what I was talking about was the future. What Dave's talking about is like literally how he and I work today.
and so let me set the frame this way. Compute using agents, automating workflows, removing a human out of that. In my mind, that is a workload compression. It's making things less effort. It's making them quicker and freeing humans up to do other things. There are certain workflows that cannot be compressed, though, and these workloads flows are the ones where human thinking is needed, where you want to ideate, where you want to produce something based on those ideas. And if you try and compress that, I think that this is where AI slop gets a bad name, or AI gets a bad name with AI slop, in that we're taking very little input and asking an AI to produce a lot of output. It fills things in, it makes things up, it hallucinates. It's
It's tap
terrible, and you
dancing.
can,
It's like
yeah,
draw it out, like keep talking. I'm like, I don't know what to say. So, but oh yeah, dude, I never thought of that about how like some things you want to compress. Like I have, like when I know exactly what that like PowerPoint presentation I need to make, but I just need to like digital ditch digging and go through and do it. Like I wish I could click my fingers, or like expense reports or travel. Like I wish I could click my fingers and have the flights. Um, but when I'm thinking like, okay, there's like think about our strategy moving forward. Like sometimes you just need that kind of like staring out the window, looking at birds, like just like chewing on that, and you don't like. I would love to be better at that, but I don't like if you just put the knowledge in my head, like I didn't earn it, and then it doesn't
yeah,
stick. And so like
yeah,
I want to like I need time deeply thinking about the stuff that's important. I guess I could even argue that if you compress everything else, I have more time to think about these deep things. So, but
exactly.
I never thought about that time compression thing, but that's really what it is.
Yeah. And the next logical argument in this is, well, AI is only good for compression workflows. The ones where you really need to think, you need to keep AI far away from that. But actually, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that you can use AI in a different way to expand your thinking. So you can give it more context, and the more context you give it, the more thinking you do with the AI, the better the output that you get. It's your thinking, but the value of it's been elevated by the fact that you're thinking externally with AI.
And this is something that
And
I mean, like this is all over LinkedIn nowadays and stuff. Like the whole I think everyone knows. You know, you can have a chat conversation with AI, and the more you type, the more it has. Um, like Whisper Flow is out there, like literally advertising that more context is better. So you should have AI. You should be able to talk to it, so you can like ramble on for hours and give it more context, which is haha funny, but also very true. And the idea that like everyone knows AI is better when don't just ask it to do this. Like drag in, here's a paper, here's a document, here's an example before, here's what my thinking is. Here. So the more like files you add into your AI conversation to give the AI more background context, like the better the results are because it knows what the heck it's doing. So that's what you're talking about. Like more context is better. It's that.
absolutely, I came across this completely by accident as I'm evolving my AI usage. Exactly like you said, the more I put in, the better it came back. So I started religiously, sort of greedily harvesting every piece of context that I could legitimately get. So meeting transcripts, or even the thoughts I'm having about the work I'm doing, I'm writing them down religiously so I can get them and put them in a place where the AI can sort of search them and look at them and use them in my thinking. So each additional piece of context that I put in what we could call a context vault elevates and compounds, and it makes it better. So something I thought about something last week is, if it's relevant and useful to what I'm thinking about this week, it can be brought into the mix.
And I should say
So this,
to jump in, when you say context vault, this is like for people listening, don't overthink that. This is just like an AI term for like the place it's holding all its context, but it could be just like a folder on your computer that has like a bunch of note files in it. It could be OneNote. It could be truly, it could be like a paper notebook, and you just like take photographs of the page and like load them into your iPhoto app or whatever. Like the point is, don't get stuck on like, wait, what is the context vault is like for every worker is different, and it's just like where you hold your like notes and ideas and to-do lists and all that kind of stuff.
absolutely. And as I said, the more information in this vault, the more it compounds. But what I also didn't expect was that the sheer act of writing or even dictating, because I also use voice dictation for most of my conversations with AI. The act of talking through my thoughts and externalizing them really clarified my thinking. And this is before I even got a response from the AI. Just sort of talking out loud about what I'm thinking about helped me to sort of engage with my thinking process more deeply.
Oh,
And
that's
then what the
interesting.
AI
So
gives me back.
it's not even like you're just like, oh, like I want to use AI to help me think. I know AI needs a lot of information. So what do I want to tell the AI? And then you push record to start dictating to it. And just the act of you like speaking all the things that were important to you helped you kind of like your pre-processing phase is already helping your thinking, and you haven't even you haven't burned a single token yet of AI.
In software engineering, there's a term called rubber ducking, where if you have a bug that you're having trouble thinking, you pretend that there's a rubber duck on your desk and you explain the problem to the rubber duck. And the theory is that by externalizing your thinking, by talking through the problem, you'll stumble across the answer. And it's effectively this, but with the added insight that the duck can talk back to you and it can provide you other insights that you've already given it in the past. So
Uh
it's sort of like,
yeah, and the duck is getting like smarter and smarter every 6 weeks.
yeah, too smart sometimes.
This is like a
It's getting
horror
too big for
movie
its own boots.
plot.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um, so the problem is now I've started working this way. I just can't go back to not working in this way. And I don't think I'm alone in this. I know you're doing the same. I think this is happening across the board. I think people, knowledge workers, are doing this in greater and greater numbers, and it's happening quietly, but it's snowballing. And I think that this is something that enterprises are going to have to deal with in the short to medium term.
Okay,
Because
pause for a
it,
second because I want to like be crystal clear on what this you're talking about. What this is. So first of all, you're not talking about AI product. It's not like you just have. This is not like super. You know, this is not some new product that you're using. This is just like regular Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever. You're using the same like chat LLM interface you always do. The difference is instead of you loading like some files, like dragging in some documents to have a conversation, and then the next day you throw that conversation away and start again. Instead, you're just collecting into your context vault, which is just a folder on your computer, or it's a
folder.
OneNote, or it's photos, or whatever. You're collecting all that. You tell Claude, hey, everything you need to know about me is over here. You're basically like building it like a little Wikipedia for Davepedia. And then now, it's your rubber duck or whatever. And then so now every conversation you have with it, it's you don't have to like re-explain everything from scratch, and you're thinking because it's all there. And so the AI, like you're like, hey, rubber duck, I want you to do this. And it's like, hang on a second, let me read. Yeah, I'm caught up. What's up, man?
Exactly. And enterprises stand to benefit greatly from this, because having knowledge workers just have all this information to hand, being able to articulate it really clearly, it's a game changer for the quality of knowledge work. Not necessarily the volume of it, but the quality of it goes up. It's more insightful. It takes into account more lessons learned from stuff that's happened before. But it also comes with a bunch of risks to the enterprise. And I think two that I'd like to talk about, first of all, is the fact that it's actually quite a blind spot and a security problem if they don't have any visibility. So if you think about the way that we're working here, it doesn't require any integration into corporate systems. It doesn't require synchronizing to email, calendar, file repositories. It is just literally the knowledge worker thinking something in their head and writing it down. That's all this
And,
needs to be in its
and that's
minimal
how it
form.
began because using AI in this way, like I've been calling it a second brain. I don't love that term. I think it's a thing that other people use, but like you are the one that told me this. Like that's kind of how this is 6 months ago, but you explained this concept to me, and you're like, nah, man, like. And I'm just using my own personal Claude subscription. This has nothing to do with Citrix. I just,
Mm.
you said no, just like create a folder, talk to it about what you want. Like here's who I am and what I want, and then so I'm just like it doesn't like at Citrix we use Citrix, so I can't get my information out of Citrix onto my laptop, but I don't need it because I just am like, well, here's a blog post, here's all the blogs I write, those are all public. Here's some speeches I give on YouTube, those are public. And then I just spent an hour or two just kind of like pontificating to it about like my worldview, and then wham bam, I
Yeah.
got a super smart
And
rubber duck.
yeah, indeed. And I think I don't hate the term second brain. I think what is really useful is that it highlights just how individual everybody's first brains are. In that I came to you and spoke to you about this super early in this process for me. I think it was like week one of like, oh my goodness, look what I can do here. So I'd not really developed my system into anything concrete. It was just an early, hey, look, isn't this a cool thing?
Put
And
a pin.
since that,
Hang on. Put a pin in that because we were going down the path of, you were saying that a challenge. There's two challenges, and one of them was this is like invisible to the corporation, which I can say is true. This is an official Citrix
yes,
podcast, I would like to say,
absolutely,
and
yeah,
that since then, we'll talk in future shows. Like since then, we've moved our systems into Citrix, and we're doing it in ways that are approved and everything. There was never any
absolutely,
like super secret corporate information in this rubber duck vault originally because like it didn't plug in. But you're saying, like it's interesting. Like everything we were doing was invisible to the company, and it's funny now because even if the company supports this, like at Citrix, we have, we use Office, good Microsoft partner, and we use Copilot, and, there's OneNote, and like Copilot can hook in all these things, and you can start to use Copilot like from your corporate environment with your corporate account fully above board in the way that probably the executives are telling you to use it. But like, do they don't really have visibility into like how people are using this AI to sort of, as you say, what were you calling it? Like, it's not it's like expanding their thinking, I guess, right?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. I mean, just to defend our initial experiments a little bit more. It's like you could argue that it's not really very much different from having a physical notebook on my desk and putting random ideas into that notebook, which I think is something a lot of knowledge workers would do as a way of interacting with their thoughts and ideas.
Like we
The
pass
real
out notebooks as
difference,
swag.
though, yeah, that's it. We got a drawer full of them from various conferences. It's more it's more than that, though, because although the individual insights that are going into this context vault are coming from my brain, they are just thoughts that I'm having that I'm legitimately not copying out of any sensitive customer company system. Um, when you take all these breadcrumbs together and put them, you can actually synthesize them into something that could perceivably become company sensitive. So it was pretty early on in this experiment that we thought this really needs to happen within the walls of the enterprise to ensure that information is secured and managed appropriately. And the scenario you gave, where this information could be in OneDrive in the company's M365 tenant with using Copilot, it's like, yes, right now, the company doesn't necessarily have visibility of what we're doing. It has the ability to control all those pieces of information, though, and work with that. So the OneDrive data, it all exists in a company sensitive, company controlled repository. The Copilot is a company subscription. It doesn't leave the tenant. By moving this type of thinking into the enterprise, we can actually put those security controls on it. Even if they don't exist today, they can be built and engineered because it's in the right place.
So I guess
And
that's the key, is that probably everyone, I mean, since you showed me this way of working, 6 months ago or 5 months ago, it's kind of blown up. Like it's all over LinkedIn and like Reddit, and there's YouTube videos on this. Andre Karpathy, who's one of the co-founders of OpenAI, did a post that got like 30 million views describing this kind of exact concept. So like it's catching on that people are starting to work this way. And so now it's like I guess the challenge for the enterprise is they have all these workers who are using AI in this way. Like their little rubber duck vaults get like more and more powerful. Just as the more you use it, the more context it gets, and the more files that go in there, and the more ideas and whatever. And it's sort of a risk for like compliance. Like, is there PII in there? Is a risk for if like security, if the person leaves the company, this all goes with them, because it's like their personal, like ChatGPT subscription, and who even knows that it was in there. So I see how that's something that companies. It's kind of like in the earlier days of consumerization of IT. You couldn't block
Yeah.
that from people. You had to, but also you can't like put the smoke back in the bottle. Like when I was using this thing, when you first told me to start working this way, oh boy, like within 2 hours, I was like, oh, this is fun. Like this changes everything. I'm never going back to working without a system like this. And it's literally 2 hours after using it. So the companies can't tell workers, no, you can't work this way. But
They
they
need to
also,
provide a way of doing it.
yeah,
Basically, we need to find the enterprise's challenge is to find a way of bringing this within the walled gardens and enabling this workflow so they can get the benefits from it, so their knowledge workers can get the benefit from this. And if they don't, they will just do it anyway
yeah,
outside
and
of the control
there's
of
literally no
enterprise.
way. There's no tell. Like you'll just think your employees are like took a can of spinach, like Popeye, and like we're super workers now. What is? You said there was two things. So the one risk was that it's invisible to the enterprise. What was the other one?
The other one then is that we've talked about this notion of the more context, the better. And that is largely true until you reach a certain scale. At which point, if the context vault, the second brain, the repository of all the information gets so big that interacting with that data set becomes cumbersome. So like AI models can handle million token windows these days, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should shove a million tokens worth of context into every single request. I mean, first of all, it will cost a fortune. So ingesting an entire vault just to ask a specific question about a specific customer is it's a very inefficient way of working. But also that just like humans, if you give the AI too much noise, too much irrelevant context, the quality of its output actually diminishes because it struggles to focus on what's important. So the other risk that enterprises need to do is to make sure that the data is sanitized, that it's relevant still, that it's pruned for, so the old data sets are removed, that it's organized in such a structured way that like this is how we understand this is relevant to this customer and this project and this different sphere of responsibility that the knowledge worker is working with. So we need to
It's
be able
interesting
to.
because it's a very like you can't just turn this on and tell employees like now you have it. Like first of all, probably everyone who's using Copilot today or Gemini, like with their corporate subscriptions, theoretically could do this today, or like some whatever their own version of this. But you have to sort of you really have to show the workers that it's a thing, and then also like I can say after working with this myself, you have to sort of be careful that like you don't outsource too much thinking to it. Like maybe I say, oh, you know everything about me, like write a blog post about this. It'll do it. It'll be good. It's not a Brian blog post. Like I wouldn't want to just publish it, but maybe it had some ideas I wouldn't have thought of. But if you're an employee who's like not really engaged, they're like, you know what? It's like just work. Who cares? Publish. But now you can sort of get to the point where like, especially in large knowledge worker enterprises where your workers are just letting AI do more. It's more of a risk of like what, like, there's a lot there. This is not an IT
Yeah,
issue, by the way. This is,
no.
yeah.
It's like a management information. It's like every single data source within an enterprise suddenly becomes something that is even more valuable. And I think the enterprises that will rise to the challenge are the ones that will look at every system of record, every application, everything, and look at it as a consumer service that needs to be provided to the business in a way that can be consumed by AI. So putting a MCP in front of it, having it be accessible, and making sure that the data is relevant, clean, and secure as well. Only providing information that a user is entitled to do.
And then
And
plus all that
so,
boring IT stuff like governance and compliance
yeah,
and audit and all that. So this is interesting too because this kind of ties back into like the earlier conversation about AI using your existing applications and your existing enterprise systems. Because on the one hand, you can see how this like kind of rubber duck context vault thing does empower employees, especially those employees who are particularly engaged. with more powerful thinking. They truly are starting to use AI as like an extension of their thinking, not just like a fancy Google lookup engine or whatever. Um, and you can see if as you're using the system more and more, it knows more about like you and your work and the things you're doing. Um, you have the ability to actually connect it into your enterprise environments. So like into my desktop environment. So if there's things I want to do and I'm working with my kind of like context system in this way, um, where it knows how to use the various applications it needs. It can connect into my corporate email. It can connect into my, into spreadsheets. It knows, oh, you need to do this, and like this is in ClickUp, and this is in Salesforce, and this is in Gainsight, and this is over here, and plug that one in there, and then here's a process. So the whole thing about like, why would you want AI to use a computer? It's not so you can automate things. Like we're knowledge workers. We don't really have tasks that are that automatable. If we did, we'd be task workers. Um, it's not about so we can automate things, but it's just so that, hey, as AI is sort of helping us work more and more and more, and it's having access to like my files and my emails, why wouldn't I also want it to be able to like interactively process the systems and put it into the systems that I already use? Which IT, by the way, has existing governance for, and we can sort of extend that. That to me is why computer using agents and why AI using computers and AI using browsers is a thing, because it takes what you're saying, that like kind of rubber duck context cognitive extension, combine it with access to the existing corporate data systems and applications. Now you got the future.
Yes, indeed.
Is that or
Um,
the future, or is that now? That's
well, that's
I
the
mean,
thing is, it's
yeah,
if it's the future that's coming up really, really fast, probably faster than anybody could have predicted.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So
and
I
I
think we
think
just go on.
I was going to say, coming back to the thread of the second brain stuff, because I think that that's probably the last topic that we wanted to cover as well. We've kind of talked around this a little bit in that you and I have talked about the fact that these context vaults that we have, we think of them as second brains because they are repositories that contain our thoughts and can be used and leveraged in such a way. Um, One of the interesting things that we've done with our individual second brains is looked at ways that we could actually make this information available to other people as well. Isn't that right?
Well, I mean, we were talking, so uh, like both of us being kind of technical people, we're doing this context vault thing, like you were saying, with all these files, and we store them in GitHub, like just because it's like centralized, privately stored in GitHub, but it's centralized. It gives us, like version control and like rollback, and you kind of like look through history, and it's just interesting. And we're like, hey, we should connect our 2 second brains together, um, and that worked, and it was chaos because like yeah, it just like you were saying, like it was getting confused and like whose ideas were whose, and
But we figured out that with very clear delineation, getting another person's perspective is still very feasible and possible by having a MCP connector to your public vault. I can say, what does Brian think about this? And I can make a very conscious effort to conscious request to well, what does your cognition say about this? And there's a very clear guardrail between my thinking and your thinking, and never the twain shall meet unless we actually ask for your perspective.
yeah, and it's interesting because like so in each of our own personal context vaults, like it is like personal for each of us. They are sort of architected in different ways, just as they make sense for us to work with. But it's like you're also inner thoughts. Like there's customer information, there's like roadmap, there's like strategy. So I don't want all that like going like out the door. It's like it's like the difference between like what you really think and what you say. And so we each, as sort of an experiment, decided to make like public versions of our second brain, context vault, rubber duck archive, whatever, um, and actually make them available so that anyone can plug into them. So this is something that we both do. We'll put the links to these in the show notes. But every AI like product today, you can go into the settings, connectors, and you can like push a button and like, connect it in via MCP to like other data sources. You can actually connect it into the Dave or the Brian or both data sources, and sort of now I'm using it and saying, oh, like what would Dave think about this idea? And it sort of knows it's not merging the brains together, but it knows like, oh, there's this MCP pipe I'm going to, and that's someone else's opinion, and I'll pull it in and like help you, do your own processing. It's wild. So it's kind of very experimental and very early, but it's out there. You can read more about this. I think in our final couple minutes as we close up today, we should. Well, Dave, you read about this all the time on LinkedIn. That's where people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. I publish every week or so on LinkedIn, and this is on topics like this: personal knowledge management, thinking with AI, that kind of thing.
And then I'm sort of I'm writing on LinkedIn also, and on the Citrix blog site. We'll put the links in the show notes as well. I'm really more writing about like this kind of stuff and how it ties into enterprise IT and like sort of enterprise end user computing, and how we connect together and how we think about all this. So I think I, I think we have a show, man. I think there's like, even right now I can think of like 20 different episodes I want to have about these conversations. I would say to you, the audience, reach out to us. You can find us on LinkedIn and let us know about future topics you might want to hear. This show is in audio and video version. So by the time you're actually seeing or watching this, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can listen to it like a regular podcast on like Spotify and Apple and stuff like that. And vice versa. If you want to see a video version, that's available too. So I think with that, we're going to wrap up this first episode of the Citrix AI Hotsheet. Dave, thanks for taking the plunge and doing this. This is fun. I think we'll keep the conversation going.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure talking to you as always. See you later.
Thanks.